everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reflections of the Father's Heart. So, today's guest is somebody that I've known probably for at least 6 years. We were trying to figure it out before we got on, and I want to say it's been about 6 years. She is an incredible woman. You're going to love her. You're going to love her story. You're going to just love just who she is. I feel like Jesus has really done such an amazing work in her heart because she loves him so much, and she's been so willing to walk with him through some really deep things. So this is Letty Wickey. Letty is a mom of 4 beautiful children. She is a wife, but she really impacts, I feel like, a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I feel like Letty is the friend that everybody wants to hang on to and everybody wants to go to with all of their stuff because she's so amazing. So Letty, thank you for being on today. I'm so grateful.
Sandi, thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor.
I'm so excited. Well, there are a lot of different ways that we could go, I feel like, with this podcast. And so I think Letty will definitely be a reoccurring guest because there are so many different things that we can talk about. But where we're going to start is I feel like the Letty that you see today, obviously, if you're listening, you can't see her. If you see the video, you can see her, but she's such a bright light, so beautiful, is very different than even the Letty that I met many years ago. I mean, you were always very beautiful, but I feel like the lights in your eyes just shine so brightly now. And so I thought, why don't we start by just talking a bit about where things started for you and how you actually grew up? Because I think you grew up in a way that may be different from a lot of people that are listening. So would you share a little bit about the culture that you grew up in?
Yes. So I was born and raised Amish. I think I was in my 20s when we left. But it was just such a huge difference coming out of the Amish. What I was raised in compared to what it is now. It is a difference between night and day, for sure.
Totally different life, right? So, will you start by maybe describing a little bit about what it means to be Amish? Like, how are you expected to live? What do you believe as an Amish person? Because I think for some people, they don't know that, like in the Amish, for example, a lot of times you don't have electricity or those types of things. And I know maybe some do, but could you share a bit more about that, about what it means to be
Yes.
Amish?
Yes. So in the Amish, there are so many different communities, so many different churches, and each church has their own thing, their own style of the way the clothes are made. Um, I grew up with absolutely no electric, but we did have running water in the house through via pump, like a hand pump, and then, a cistern and stuff. Um, so for the women, they were basically expected to do all the work at home anyway, from what I was used to seeing. Um, the laundry and having baby after baby. And I would see so many women just, worn out. They never had time to recuperate after having a baby. The men, the way they used their authority was very abusive. I think that many people think that when they think about abuse, they think about physical, but I don't think that they realize the mental and the emotional and the spiritual abuse that also takes place. So that's really, really huge. And you just don't question anything, with the church. You just go about everything that they decide. And our belief, so many people think that the belief is based in God, and they might even say that, but the belief is deeply rooted in following the bishop and the man-made rules. That is very, very huge. And the rules are so many that it's just impossible to follow all of them. And so a lot of stuff gets hidden, but there is so much abuse, especially with children. every single type of abuse that you can imagine. And the abuser gets more attention, like he gets treated like the victim should be treated, should be taken care of. And coming out of that, like I always knew that it was wrong, but it was so normalized that when, I believe it was in 2018, when some things came up and I had to take a hard look at when people shared, wait a minute, this isn't okay, this is very wrong. It made me realize just how, like, wait a minute, this is really, really wrong. It is just so normalized. I remember when I had to do a forensic interview to, like, the language barrier for the Amish kids, and they couldn't speak English. I had to interpret. And the level of brainwashing is just, it is so, so huge. And when I would ask her the questions, you could see that it happened. We all knew that it happened. The mom knew that it happened, but she hesitated and she's like, no, like, she was so confused. And, she didn't know how to name her body parts. She didn't understand any of that because we're taught they're shameful. And it's just been so much. And then, I was even pulled off to the side from the bishop because I had a cross in my house with a Bible verse on it. It's, I think, what they consider worldly is in their life every single day. The pride, the abuse, all that stuff that they consider worldly, they live out every single day. And, when we left the Amish, I was in the grocery store and one of the Amish guys walked up to me and wanted me to come back. And I said no. And he told me that I'm going to go to hell. Like, that is very deeply rooted. And I thought for years that I was going to go to hell. But I thought it couldn't be any worse. But I truly believe that I was going to go to hell.
Wow. I so appreciate you sharing that because I mean, I know even for me personally, right? Like even when we first met or there is this perception that a lot of people on the outside have of Amish communities that, oh, they kind of set themselves apart. They live off the land. They live a very humble life. They live kind of a pure life. That's the
Mm-hmm.
that's the image, right? That everybody on the outside
Mm-hmm.
often believes. And yet you were living such a different story being in it. It's so different in it. And I hear what you're saying. It's not just the little community or the community that you were in. It's pervasive. It's all throughout Amish communities that this stuff happens. And so when you were growing up, if somebody that wasn't Amish, like how were you to interact with somebody who wasn't Amish? Like what was that like for you?
So we were allowed to, especially with my parents, we were allowed to interact with them because my parents had a horse boarding farm that brought in a lot of non-Amish people. So we were allowed to interact with them. I would say more than even some Amish people, and then at sometimes not so much. But with the ex-Amish people, we were not allowed to interact with them, period. And I know that we did sometimes, but it was only if we did not eat their food, if we did not eat at the same table, even if the tables were touching, they had to be pulled apart. They truly believed in, like, if they treat the ex-Amish in that way, it will make them want to come back. Basically, if they shun them, it will make them want to come back. And it is just a total opposite. And the table is what I call the shame table, honestly, because what for me is when I used to allow that kind of treatment, but now, like, it's not okay. I wouldn't allow someone to treat my children that way. So it's not okay for the way that they treat the ex-Amish. But I did notice that if it comes to money, they're more easily going to interact with you if it means that they make money.
So it would be okay to make money off of a non-Amish person per se, but it wouldn't be okay for you to, as an Amish person, to go maybe marry somebody who's not Amish for the most part.
No, that wouldn't be okay. It would be, you would be very, yes, shunned. It's not that you're allowed to take money off of them, off of the ex-Amish people when you're Amish. It's just kind of one of those things that are behind closed doors.
Mm, that makes a lot of sense. So it's behind closed doors. So you grow up, you have running water because of the pump, but you don't have electricity. And you mentioned even earlier, Letty, about that girl that you were helping to interview. And did you say that she didn't speak English?
Not very much at all. It was very hard for her to understand any English at all.
So what is the language that typically an Amish person would speak?
You know, they all have very different languages. There are some communities that I can't understand and they can't understand me. I grew up with Pennsylvania Dutch type where it's not really considered even a language. And that's what we had to speak in school. To the teacher, we had to speak English. And the German workbooks that we used was nothing that was had no the language was not what we were taught at all. So it was really hard to understand. The bishop, the deacon, all of them, when they preached, that language was completely different from what we were taught. So I could maybe pick out a word here and there if the sermon was preached over and over again. But that was like the only way. I didn't understand what they were saying. And that language is almost like a heaven or hell type of thing. Like you have to speak.
So they're in the Amish church, the bishop, the deacon, who's ever basically preaching the sermon, they're speaking in a language that you don't even understand.
Yes, most people don't even understand.
And I remember too, and I know we've talked about this, that same language, so they spoke a German language when they would preach,
Mhm.
that was also the kind of Bible that you were supposed to have. Was it a German Bible?
Yes. And again, I didn't understand maybe a word here and there, but we were never taught that language that we were supposed to read. And I remember asking someone sometime, like, okay, what does this prayer mean? Because we had to say the Heavenly Father prayer in Matthew. We had to say it in German. And I had to learn it, to memorize it. And I remember asking, well, what does it mean? And I was told we don't necessarily need to know what it means, that God's grace covers that. But yeah, I was very little. I was curious. Like I wanted to know, what am I praying?
I think that is so, I don't know, it's kind of blow away to think that you're growing up, you're attending a church, you're being told to read a Bible, and you're being spoken to at a church in a language that you're not taught, that you don't understand. And then you only can, and you could only read a German Bible too. Is that accurate? Like you had to only read the German Bible.
Yes. Yes, all of that is what how our church was and how I grew up.
So you're growing up reading something you don't understand. So then is it that the church, the Amish church then is the controlling arm in the community? In other words, they decide how you dress, they decide what you do, they decide how you live, and then they interpret whatever God means. Like they're the ones that decide.
Very, very much so. I mean, it's so controlling. It's even to the point where, when you get married, the intimacy between a husband and wife, that's controlled. It's controlled. You're not allowed to do it the night you're married. You have to wait 3 nights or then you will be shunned. Um, it's very spiritually, mentally, emotionally abusive. And the thing is, they actually believe this stuff.
I mean, that is such spiritual abuse. And
It
to
is,
think that they're controlling everything and then you can't even read something that you understand. So there's no chance that you're going to be able to go and discover for yourself what the Bible actually says or what's actually being said in those prayers or sermons because they're making sure it's a language that you don't even understand.
yes, yes. And when some people that started asking questions because they were curious, the Bible was taken away from them. They said that they're starting to be led astray. They're reading too much Bible, and they would take the book away from them.
Now, in the Amish community, is their belief, and I kind of know this, but I'm going to ask anyway, is their belief that so the man is the authority in the home and the woman has no voice and then the children have no voice? Is that kind of how it works as far as the family
Yes, the woman
system?
is just basically a slave baby machine, has no voice, has no say so. The kids are basically meant to be seen but not heard. In, a lot of homes, there is just so much damage that takes place. And, I see some women that have actually taken their kids and, left their husband. Um, and they were completely shunned. There was some women that didn't have food for their children. The community refused to step in and help her, even though the reason that she left was because of the horrific abuse that was taking place. They still took that man's side. They stood beside him the whole way through. It's absolutely repulsive of, what happens.
So even if it's known that this man is abusing his children or abusing his wife, they will
So
still take the side of the man.
yes. So when that happens, it's usually pushed on the woman while she's not doing her job as a wife. It's usually the woman's, like everything is the woman's fault,
And so
or the kids.
when you were growing up, did you have a lot of brothers and sisters? Like, was it a large family?
It was a large family. I grew up with 8 brothers and 1 sister. I was number 7, I believe.
And I know it's not uncommon for Amish families to have a lot of children too, kind of to your point. The women are seen as they're supposed to have babies and take care of everything and not have a voice. And then the man is able to do what he wants pretty much is kind of the sense I
Yes,
get.
very much so.
And I also know, and I think it's important for people to understand too, in this abusive system, the church wants to handle everything, right? So if there
Oh, yeah.
is something that the man does, let's say he hurts a child or abuses a child, the expectation, right, would be that he would come and confess it to the church and they would just shun him for a number of weeks and then he would be back and everything's
Yeah.
fine.
Yes. And so yes. And what I've seen is then the victim, nothing gets done to the victim. And that it's usually pushed on them that it's their fault. It creates this belief in the victim that they are very unworthy, unwanted, just everything, because most of them will truly believe that it was her fault, his fault, and the
Yeah.
man gets to go on with his life.
And often the man doesn't even end up leaving the family, right? Like he's just told to go home and be shunned for several weeks from the church, but he's still with his family who he has been abusing.
Yes, yes. And I know some communities have these type of counseling facilities, but I know that those have been very detrimental to some people. Most people that go there.
So is it more to kind of keep things controlled by the church versus really helping the people that need counseling?
I believe so. Yes.
So when you were growing up in this and you're seeing this, obviously you're in the community, you're attending the church, you're around, right, other families and seeing this as you're growing up. I really appreciated what you said about it feeling normal, like how normalized it was.
Hmm.
So was there a time when you were younger that you just thought, I'll just be Amish for the rest of my life?
That's a really good question because I always pushed the limits. I always got in trouble, always because I pushed the limits. I saw all this stuff happening and I felt like it was wrong, but then I felt like I was wrong for thinking that it was wrong what was being done. And that was really hard for me. I just thought that everyone should love each other and be kind to each other. Like everyone, no matter whether you're Amish or not. I didn't understand that. And I remember asking, well, the English people, are they going to get to heaven? And I was told, well, we don't know. We can't answer that. And so, and we also couldn't answer if we're going to make it to heaven or not. And if you profess that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, you were having a new belief that was going to take you to hell. So yeah, there was just so much. And I feel like the rest of my life, I will still be uncovering lies that I believed about myself, about God, about other people.
Well, this is so important because that kind of experience gets so ingrained when you're young. So
Very
here
much.
is this abusive system. And even what you just said, that if somebody in the Amish in your community were to have said, well, Jesus Christ is Lord, they would have been considered a heretic. Like, no, you're going to go to hell if that's what you believe. That's a new belief. We don't believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes. And I still remember when this non-Amish girl gave me a Bible and it was in English. And I remember picking it up sometimes and reading it, but I didn't understand what I was reading. Like I had no idea, but I think I kind of got sidetracked back to like I was always pushing the limits, always getting in trouble. I was curious. I wanted to discover new things, but I was destined to get married and have kids and do laundry, cleaning, all that stuff. And I hated the thought. I hated the thought of that's all I'm ever going to do. Like there has to be more. But it looked like hopeless. It just looked, that's all I was good for. That was it. Like I would get in trouble. Even the bishop and the preachers didn't like me. Like I was not supposed to say anything. I was not supposed to question anything. And I didn't. I mean, I kind of, just spoke up, and that was very, very frowned on. Like you do not do that.
Wow. And
And
so, oh, go ahead. Sorry, go.
so much of that, there's so many times that I was told, I was too loud. There were so many messages around my personality. I was an embarrassment. I need to just be modest in a sense of what they think is meek as a girl. And I would get jealous because my brothers would get to do all this stuff. And since I was a girl, a lot of times I wasn't allowed to. And so it was very hard for me. It was just, I was not looking back, I thought there was always something wrong with me. Like, why can't I just settle down? Why can't I be this quiet girl? It's because now I know God didn't create me that way.
He didn't create you that way. But I really appreciate what you're saying too, because I'm actually even thinking as you're talking, you grow up in something and you could feel or sense something's wrong, but yet the teaching is
Mm,
if you sense something is wrong, there's something wrong with you. If this
yes,
doesn't seem right, there's something wrong with you. And so then that becomes very conflicted inside, right? Oh, there must be something wrong with me that I'm even thinking that something's wrong.
yes, very much, very much. I mean, I hated myself. Um, and now seeing the difference, but even our kids, I've never told them anything bad about the Amish, like never anything. I was actually never even going to ever share really my life. And they still have some memories, not much, of being Amish. But as they got older, they started questioning things. If we would go around cousins and stuff, or if we would have to sit at a separate table. they would question that, and I would say, well, they don't believe that, I can sit at their table and eat. And they would be like, but they do all this stuff. They dress in Amish clothes, they drink, they smoke, they watch TV, they listen to like all this stuff. Like our kids couldn't understand it. Like they saw it for themselves, but I left the Amish, and so I'm shunned, even though I have an intimate relationship with Jesus. Um, it's just sickening. It's so twisted.
It's very twisted. It goes back to that. Like, as long as you're willing to pretend that you're following these rules, even though you're totally not, then you can be in. The moment you're speaking up and saying, this is wrong and I'm not going to be in this, you're shunned and there's something wrong with you. It's polar opposite.
Yes,
Now, let me ask you, so you ended up getting married in the Amish. You got
mhm,
married, you married somebody who was Amish and then started having children.
yes,
And how old were you when you got married? Is that common too in the Amish to marry younger?
yes. It's very common. It's, at 16 you get start to go out and um, be with others. A
Makes
lot of
sense.
parties, or
Did you say a lot of partying?
a lot of partying, a lot of drinking. Actually, I had actually gotten really, really bad with the drinking. Um,
Mm.
it was really bad. And then um, it was through my mom. Like we made a deal. If I, stop for a year, she'll give me this. And I did. And ever since that, I've never been able to handle even the smell of like hard liquor. It turns my stomach, which is a good thing. Yeah.
And so when you hit like 16 years old and then there's a lot of partying, there's a lot of, okay, you can drink. I mean, I get that your mom kind of intervened with you at some point and said, let's have you not do that. But at the same time, I can understand why you would gravitate toward alcohol, because you would have so much suppressed. Because I think the one thing we want to mention, Letty, is emotions. Like
Mm.
how emotions are handled or are seen in Amish.
Yeah. So the first time that I even learned about emotions was when I had, I believe it was like 2 sessions of therapy that my mom had taken me to,
Mhm.
kind of like a neighbor guy who's a counselor. And he drew on this board a circle. And then he wrote every emotion, sad, anger, all that stuff inside that circle. And it was such an aha moment, like, wait a minute, I feel all of those, all of those. Like I didn't even know. And I believe I was almost 16, 15 or 16 years old. So that was the first time that I, like, wait a minute, these are like, even then I knew I felt all of it, but then what? Like it was, all piled, jumbled together. And my outlet was smoking, drinking. I wasn't allowed to go to parties, but I would sneak out every chance I got because I was grounded so much. And it was just, um, looking back, I think if someone would have seen the little girl that was crying out and just, came alongside and helped her, it would have been a lot different. But instead, you needed to straighten up. You didn't know how, like, how do you straighten up? And so then everything just got stuffed inside.
So no wonder, I appreciate what you said. No wonder you're going to drinking and smoking and all of these things, because your emotions are so stuffed inside. They're not allowed. The expression isn't allowed. So of course you're going to go to these things. And
Yeah.
then did you, at the time, obviously you're, 17, you get married. Did you kind of see that as a way to get out of your house or as a way to do what you're supposed to do in terms of getting married?
It was so when I became pregnant, I was super excited. But we still lived with my parents. A lot of times that happens until the couple finds a place, or sometimes they build like a, living quarter shed type thing. Um,
Yeah.
so we rented off of my parents the house just right beside them after living with them for maybe a month or two. I was really excited, but I had, by that point, I didn't know myself. I depended on my mom and my sister. I'm not sure if I can even find the word for it, but like it was like I didn't know myself at all. But as long as I was with them, it was a very um, controlling in a sense. I took their word over my husband's.
Because that was how you were brought up, that that's what you were
Yes,
supposed to do. So you
yes,
had to be
and
dependent on your mom for all of
yes.
that.
And I was very, very terrified of displeasing them. I absolutely craved acceptance from them in the worst way. It was so bad. But then we moved out of the community about 45 minutes away, and I started seeing some things that was not healthy between my husband and I. And I know for my part was he was basically nothing. The only thing that mattered is what my parents said. And I started seeing that and I started trying to change it, but I wasn't sure how. And another thing is there were so many toxic roots still inside of me that I had no idea about. And I didn't understand, like, how do you go about changing all of this? Where do you start? And there was no help for any of that. Even just like our kids, I remember growing up thinking my kids will never ever go through what I did. Every single day they will be told, I love you. They will be shown affection. And one day I realized I can say it all I want, but how do you love? What what is love? What is that? And and for me, I always go on this journey like I need to know. But you have that mother instinct. Like, how could no one listen to that mother instinct that's built inside of you for your children? And then we met with some other ex-Amish people. They had created their own church, and they were the ones that um, led us to Christ. I still remember that night so well. When I accepted Jesus into my heart, I felt it instantly. Like everything changed. It was just amazing. But then what? I was still in an Amish church. It was just like, now what? And this group of people wanted us to join their church. And I'm so thankful that we didn't. There was something that kept stopping us. Looking back, it was basically the same thing as Amish, just in a different way. It was, again, a set of rules, which they said they don't have rules, but yet everyone's wearing dresses, everyone's wearing head coverings, all this stuff. And so all these ex-Amish people come out and they try to basically recreate what they came out of in a different way. And so I still interacted with my family very much after leaving the Amish. Um, some of my brothers were not okay with it. There were quite a few that um, in the Amish that tried to get me to leave my husband. And I kept trying to tell him, like, no, he didn't force me. He was willing to stay Amish for me. He never forced me. And then the blame is always put on someone else. Well, some other ex-Amish person led you astray. It's just a vicious cycle of that. And I remember going to several different churches after leaving the Amish, and they did feed me what I needed in the place that I was in at the time. But something that I saw is many people never grow past that church. Like it's there. And I was so hungry and I wasn't being fed again. I thought there's something wrong with me. You know, I believed that I was suffering the punishment that I had. I believed that I punished my parents. The Bible verse that says, um, your children will, for generations and or 4 generations. And I was told that my parents have to suffer the consequences of me. One day when I was reading the Bible and I came upon that verse and I had to read it over and over and over again. And even then it's like, is God lying? Are the Amish lying? I was so confused because that said that the kids will suffer for 4 generations from their parents, from the parents' sins. And I started learning about, bondage and generational and all of that stuff. And then when something devastating happened I still dressed Amish clothes. When I went home, I was told, that I still have to dress Amish and that we weren't allowed to park in their driveway. But it's okay for Amish to have vehicles and just put someone else's name in it or things. It's not okay, but that's just the kind of stuff that takes place. And I remember the day that I decided no more. Like, my kids are growing up. Everybody's asking, why do you wear Amish clothes to go to the Amish? And it was because of fear. It was because of fear. And again, I wanted that acceptance and I wanted that approval. And I still remember the day that I stopped. I was absolutely terrified. It's almost like, it's one of those, like, you're going to go to hell. It's real. And that fear and that terror is so raw and it is so real. But so the more that I started doing stuff like that, the more, it was like the more the door opened between God and me as far as, a relationship starting.
So, did it feel like the more that you started to realize that the stuff that you were told about God and the stuff that you were told about who He is, the more that you started to realize, wait, that's actually not true, and you were able to turn from some of the fear, the more it sounds like you were able to see Him?
Yes. And just have, more of a confidence of that, God is for me. Because I learned for years and years and years that, God hates me. He hates me to the core, and I was a mistake. And everything that would happen to me, it was just, I deserved it. It was a punishment. That's what I truly believed. Um, that was to be true.
So you're in this place of believing, oh, God is punishing me. God isn't for me. God hates me. I've left the Amish and they're, I'm shunned and I'm supposed to go to hell. And yet now you found Jesus and this new relationship with Jesus. And so I really appreciate this because I think that, to your point, sometimes we can leave something that isn't good. And, kind of like how the Israelites left Egypt, but they still had to get Egypt out of their hearts.
Mm.
So just because you leave the place doesn't mean that you don't still have the same beliefs that you did back there, which I appreciate you saying, because I do think that sometimes, yeah, people might leave these abusive religious systems or cults or however you want to frame it. But if they don't actually face what's happened, heal, and be on the journey, then they'll often go into or kind of recreate almost the same thing.
Yes. Yes. And then they lead this attitude with, I've arrived. I've accepted Jesus. I've been baptized. I've been delivered. It's done. When in reality, your journey has just started. And I'm so reminded of the Bible verse in James where it talks about when you face trials of many kind. I always thought that was just physical. In the physical, the daily life struggles. What I didn't know, it's also in here. Um, the sanctification, it says to work out your salvation. And I truly believe that for me, that was to get into those beliefs, into those roots that were deeply rooted that were actually lies from Satan. And the thing is, we're not even aware of those lies that we believe.
It's so
But
true, right? They're buried so deeply.
yes, very
So
much.
so this, do you feel like, I really appreciate what you said too. I just want to highlight that, because what you said is, people can believe like, I've accepted Jesus, I'm saved, and it's all done, and their salvation is, but like you said, a lot of times the journey is just starting.
It is. It is. Something I've learned in grief recovery is we're never broken. We do not need to be fixed, but we become fragmented. And all those little soul parts, when we accept Jesus, yes, we accepted him into our hearts. But what about all those little soul parts that have been fragmented? And that's where Jesus wants to come in to sanctify, which means to heal. And I noticed the more that took place, the closer, the more intimate my relationship became with Jesus. And, even in physical, like I struggled with physical illnesses, lots of physical illnesses. And the more that I healed, the more that just went away.
I appreciate that, because I feel like that is another one that a lot of people miss, is that unresolved pain, that stuff from the past that isn't healed, will show up in your physical body if you don't deal with it. A lot of
Very,
times
very
we're just
much.
trying to treat the physical when actually we need to also treat the heart and the soul, right? And the
Mhm.
mind. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. If we have a broken bone, we go get it taken care of. But society, even Christianity, hasn't taught us to also take care of our heart and our soul. And I believe that that's why there's so many people leaving churches. Um, like the power that is supposed to be there to heal the sick, to help the poor, that power that we have, that authority that we have in Jesus' name, all those gifts, they think well, I know my gifts, but I think so many don't realize I'm still learning the authority and the power of Jesus in Jesus' name. It's such a journey, but I have experienced so much of it, and I hurt for the people that don't um, feel that or have that. The first time I did a session with you, it just reminds me when you prayed, I was terrified. I thought, how is this from God? I've never heard someone pray like this. Like, I don't know how this is from God. I was terrified that it's from Satan, because of what I had been taught and raised in the Amish culture. And I figured, you know what? I'm just going to trust the process and see what happens. What I saw happen was I literally felt the change physically, emotionally, mentally. I felt it, and I realized, wait a minute, this is God. He did promise to heal. Like, this is God. And I feel like so many have not experienced that or maybe even believe in
I
it.
think you're so right. It's not taught nearly as much as it should be, and it is in the Bible. Like, it is.
Mhm.
The restorative power of Jesus, like you said, is in the Bible. But I think the other side of it that is so important is you grew up in so much religious abuse that was so controlling that they didn't even want you to have a connection with Jesus. They didn't want you to even have a connection with the Word of God that you could understand. They didn't want you to have anything for yourself. So it makes sense that any of that stuff would seem so foreign. But yet I look at you now, and now you're a prayer warrior and you're one who prays over people. And, you're one out there that I feel like is just walking in all of these amazing ways. And I think that's so inspiring, to
Mm.
think about where you've come from and like where you are now.
It is, something that came to me this morning almost brought me to my knees because it was so powerful. And, maybe one day we'll share the why of why it's so crucial, why it hit me so hard that I am alive today. And I was just like, I have seen the goodness of God. I have seen the glory of God. I am alive. And then I get to see it over and over again with my husband and children. Like, how amazing is that? To be able to actually feel it in your heart, the goodness of God. Not just the Bible verses that you can say, but actually experience them in your heart.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Oh, brings me to tears. Beautifully said. And I have to say, this is, I feel like, one podcast in part of other podcasts because just for everybody listening, I mean, Letty has shared kind of an overarching experience of her journey, and there's so many other layers to her story. But we just thought it's good to start today with what it really means to grow up in that kind of a religious abuse. And one other thing I will say about the Amish, Letty, too, is because you are so sequestered from the rest of the world and you're taught that we live differently, we're Amish, we live differently, we don't engage with the outside world in these ways, it almost like keeps all of that abuse under a bubble that
It
nobody
does.
sees.
It really does. And I think that's very intended. You know, if an Amish guy does end up in court, because there are some that are like, this is not okay. If he does, okay, so I'm just going to use this one example of the mom with her children. When she went to court, all the Amish were there supporting him. Like, I still remember when the prosecutor told me that you couldn't even walk through. There was so many Amish, thinking that the more that show up and showing that they support him, the more lenient the court system is going to be on him. And unfortunately, most of the court system is very lenient with the Amish. There are calls that are made that get shoved under the rug, and that's very devastating. I remember a police officer got called to a chiropractor. She did call the police because of all the horrific marks on this little Amish girl. And he did come out, but the mom had to press charges and she refused. And he sat there and just cried. He said, because I have a 9-year-old and I know that little 9-year-old is going to get home and be abused again and again and again. And no one's there to protect. Like, you don't know what protection even looks like or means.
Because the whole culture is just covering up any abuse and making sure that things stay as they are and not protecting the people that are
Yeah.
being hurt.
Yeah. Yes. I look at Keith. And how protective he is of not just me, but the girls, all of the girls. He's very protective. My girls get to have that. And one day I was just looking at it. I just started crying because it's like, how would that be? How would that have been to have that protection? But I get to see it now. I get to experience it by watching our kids.
Which is so beautiful. And it is one thing I want to say as we're coming to a close. I think one of the things that really stands out to me with you is your whole family. Like, your kids are amazing. Your kids are,
Mm.
you know, being raised so much differently than anything that you or your husband experienced in the Amish. It's such a different life. And I think one of the things that I've seen that has been so powerful is that because you've chosen to heal, you didn't just choose to leave, you chose to heal.
Mm.
You chose that all the parts of you that, barely escaped out of there, you chose to face and say, I'm going to face this, and it's not easy. And, obviously you're still on your journey. We're all still on our journeys. But I believe because of that and because of your desire for Jesus, your children have something completely different than anything that you were raised in.
Wow, thank you.
It's true.
Wow, it is a journey, wanting the best for them. but sometimes not knowing what that looks like. But God always guides you if you're open, if you're humble, if you're willing. He always, always brings it. I mean, I still remember when even just I had no idea who you are. We're what, thousands of miles away?
Yeah.
But and thank you so much for sharing that. Um, but I still remember just telling God, if there is a person to help us, you're going to have to send that person. You know, I was at a place I always kept in the forefront of my mind. If this is what Jesus promises in the Bible, then I want to experience it. And when you just know that you know there is something inside that still needs to be healed. And I'm blown away by some of the things that I had no idea that was there. But the power of God, when you allow it is just, I don't think that I have words to describe the power of God. But he answered my prayer. I mean, he brought you. And that's where my journey became even more powerful because of, digging in. It's like digging a tree, trying to take a tree out, you have to go underneath to get the roots out. And it is the same with us. It is the same with humans. And, there's so many people that say, well, the shoe doesn't, it's not for everyone, or one thing isn't a fit for all. But the one thing I can say with grief recovery, it is a fit for all, because we all have a heart, we all have a soul. And, it's one of those things that I've learned a long time ago. If you're open, if you're willing, and if you're not in that place, well, I've arrived, or oh, I don't need that. God will work in you.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I love what you said. And that's what I was thinking as you were talking. It's been your willingness and your heart to say, yes, God, even when I don't even know what I'm choosing into, like, yes, I'm going to choose in, and I'm going to face, and you're going to walk with me. And I just feel like the results have been incredible. And I want to mention one other thing just as we close that you said that I think was important. And that is what I have really appreciated about you as a parent is that you fully understand and understood I have to be on my journey of healing and getting my full, like in the airplane, right? If they say if the airplane's going to go down, put your oxygen mask on first, then you can help others. And I think so many times parents, in their desire to help their children, kind of bypass themselves and then just are like, oh, I need to get help for the kids, not realizing that it really starts with them. And I feel like you fully got that. And as a result, your kids have flourished because of what the
Mhm.
choices that you've made to heal and to say yes to Jesus. And I think that's been huge. There can't be a better example. So I just want to say
Wow.
thank you. And thank you for being on today. This has been so amazing.
Sandy, thank you so much for having me. You have just been such a huge godsend in our life. I love
Thanks.
your heart. Thank you.
Thank you.